Colored pencils terrify me. Listen, when I do them, they just feel heavy, they require a lot of patience, and they don't move on the page like watercolor. I've spent a long time being afraid of colored pencils, but no more. And what do you do when you want to learn a medium? You learn from the best. And that means we've enlisted the help of color pencil wonder, Sarah Renae Clark. So before we get started, I have to show you what Sarah sent me, her color cubes. I was so pumped to get these. I've been seeing them popping up in my feeds on YouTube, and now they're mine. The color cubes are designed to help us choose a really powerful color palette for our project, so we don't lose all our joy in that decision-making process. So if you're someone that doesn't know a lot about color, doesn't have a lot of confidence about the color wheel and picking palettes, these cubes are your perfect match. Okay, here's how it works. Each card has a fun inspiration image on the front, and of course they're numbered, which is awesome because I've already got these all out of order. And then you have your color palette, and you can then flip it over and push that card right up next to the page that you're working on so you can do some serious color matching. And of course, there's hex codes if you're working digitally, and each card also has a 20% tint and a 20% shade of each color pictured. We all know that indecision can be one of the biggest joy blockers on this creative journey. So this tool is magic to the end of alleviating all that kind of fear. Like literally just close your eyes and pick one, and you're making art sooner than you could imagine. Head to the description below if you want to pick up your own set of these color cubes. And I have to thank Sarah so much, of course, for dealing with me and my complete ineptitude with colored pencil, but also for gifting me these amazing cubes. I'm gonna have so much fun with them. Not to mention they look super cute on my wall. I am so nervous, and I've got my paper, my hot press academy.
Yes, good.
I'm so curious, like, how you got started.
So I started coloring with pencils after I started making coloring books. And the whole reason I started making coloring books was because I really liked drawing in black and white, and I didn't like color. That sounds crazy now, right? Because like now I love color. I'm obsessed with color. And I loved color, but I didn't know how to use color. And so I was like, hey, I can make the coloring books. Everyone else could do the coloring. So I thought that making coloring books is perfect until everyone started asking me, how do I actually color in? How do I use the pencils? How do I use the markers? And I was like, I should probably figure that out. My first set of colored pencils pretty much as an adult only a couple of years ago, and it was a slippery slope from there.
So what's your favorite piece that you've done so far?
The one that jumps to mind straight away is actually the picture that I made for my mum, because my mum died from cancer quite a few years back. It's on my channel. I did in my coloring, my one color series, I did a one color with pink challenge. Pink was my mum's favorite color. And it was also like a tribute because she died of breast cancer, and pink is the color of breast cancer awareness. So I drew a page and I colored it with every pink supply that I owned. And that's the picture that yeah, it's definitely the picture because I know, because I'm feeling a bit emotional about it. So colored pencils. We haven't really talked about how we're going to approach these lessons. We're going to jump straight in. You've got hot press watercolor paper. So I'm going to use hot press watercolor paper because it is one of my favorite papers for pencils. I would actually say to people, upgrade your paper before you upgrade your pencils. That's how much I think paper matters. And I think you've said the same about watercolor. So my advice with pencils is to always keep your pencils sharp. And yet I'm probably the worst culprit of not doing that. So do what I say, not what I do.
All right. So what color would you like to start with? What have you got?
I've got
a red.
A red, scarlet.
Good solid color. Yeah, cool. I mean, I'll scrub any color. That's fine. Because I just want to show you some simple just rules with pencils and how to start. So first, let me be really naughty and tell you all the art rules that I don't follow.
I love that. You know I love that.
Yeah, because I know that's your style. All right. So the first thing I'll say is I believe there is no perfect way to hold a pencil.
Okay.
There is a little bit of like but there are definitely ways that can help with different things. You do need to find what's comfortable for you, but a few tips to keep in mind. When you hold your pencil closer to the tip, that's better for details. You're going to find it harder to do light layers if you're holding it closer to the tip, and you're going to find it harder to create smooth blends if you're using it that close, but that's going to be really good for getting into fine details. If you're holding it further back, you're actually going to find it easier to do light layers and therefore create smoother sort of gradients and stuff like that. Just not holding the pencil too tight is generally something to try and avoid, because you're going to get a sore hand. It's not good for you. I mean, depending on what you're wanting to create, you can just, like, if you just try laying down color, you can get a good feel for the pencils and the paper as a start.
Okay.
With pencils, obviously, you've got different kinds of like drawing details, which you can create like lots of pressure and you'll get the really solid color. Or if you're wanting to create layers, then you can press lighter and you're going to get that opportunity to layer up your colors. And like, you don't have to always use light layers. You don't have to always use hard layers. Again, much like watercolors, you can use this so many different ways. When you're wanting to sort of blend two colors together, that's where the layering and the pressure becomes a little bit more important, because if you're going to want two colors together, the more that you can kind of lighten your layer and head towards the white, the better transition you're going to get into the next layer. So a lot of people are put off with pencils because they don't like the pencil texture. I don't like the pencil texture, and by the end of my pictures, it is gone. So do not worry about the pencil texture. There are ways that we can get rid of that as we go. So one of the things is you're doing strokes. Your strokes there are pretty good, but if you're finding that you're seeing like certain lines in your strokes, again, the lighter that you do and the more you just practice this, you'll find that you sort of reduce your strokes naturally. But you can actually try and change direction or work different ways. But the best way to get rid of those strokes is actually try and start to work in a little bit of a circular motion. Some people actually go straight to like big circles, and I think that's probably a mistake, right? Like, you don't want your art looking like this. I mean, it can work. It's probably still, like, even with hard pressure, you're better off creating a page with this than with this. Because once you do a few layers, you're not going to see this. It'll blend in. If you pick one of the sections, or maybe draw yourself a little square, might be even a good spot, right?
Draw a square.
I drew a big square, but maybe draw smaller than what I just did. And just fill that with your color. And again, if you try to think in circles, even like I still kind of think in lines, but circular lines, if that makes any sense. Once you think you've filled that whole thing, come back and do a second layer, but press a little bit harder for your second layer. If you can still see paper underneath, what that means is that either you can add more pencil and you can add more layers.
So I have a video where I'm messing around with these colored pencils with watercolor, and I use the white pencil to like blend. And so a lot of people do use the white pencil to blend. And it's a really common thing. And it works because what you're doing is you are burnishing the last layer with the white pencil. The reason I don't recommend that, and I would recommend a blender pencil, is that a blender pencil has no color, whereas a white pencil, you're essentially adding a layer of white with what you're doing. Okay, why don't we change up our colors completely? Think of two colors that you think could work pretty well together, and we'll have a go. Where do I start? Light or dark?
It doesn't matter. Depending on what I'm coloring will determine what I'm doing. Often I actually like to use my darker color first, because then I feel like I have more control over where the shadows are, because shadows often are the one that's going to creep in too much. Because it's always easy to go darker, much like watercolor. It's a lot harder to go lighter. So what we're going to try and do is create just a little simple gradient, because I mean, I love practicing gradients. I draw them a lot. But I've sort of found that the more I've practiced gradients and just blending one color to another color, that practice of doing that, even to an obsessive level for when I do some of my testing, has meant that when I've gone back and actually done a coloring page, all of a sudden my coloring skills are a lot better. Because whatever you're coloring, no matter what the picture is, no matter how much detail it has, essentially it's the process of layering and coloring from one color to another. So what we want to do is we want to have this one starting dark on this side and slowly getting lighter as it heads towards our center point. I haven't even drawn you a line to show you where the center point is. Okay, so let's just use this as a reference. You don't have to copy this, but so let's say this is our first color, this is our second color, and this bit in the middle is where we're going to try and blend them together. We're going to do the same thing on the other side, going the other way. Now, it doesn't matter if you haven't done it dark enough, because we can get darker with the top layers. it's actually probably better to go too light than too dark with both sides because we've got lots of layers that we can build up and make it perfect. So our second color, we're going to start dark this side, and we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it the other direction. We're going to start heavy and we're going to go lighter. And if you just take it like a layer at a time, and each time you add a new layer, you can add a bit more pressure. Eventually you'll find that you end up with a fairly smooth blend by the end.
So tell me why you like these. You said these were your favorite, right? Can you explain why?
For me, the biggest thing that makes a pencil enjoyable to use is how well it blends. So the very thing that you're doing now of trying to blend two colors together, for me, is like one of the most important things that pencils need to be able to do. And a lot of pencils just don't do that well. That was like the number one thing. Like I went and tested all those 90 brands of pencils, and a lot of them just couldn't do that process well. Like from the 90 brands, there were probably 15 that I would rank sort of up there for that.
I feel like my impatience is going to get me with colored pencil.
Do you want to know a little hack? I don't know if I should tell you this hack because then it's not really pencils, right? One of the things I do like to do if I have like a big project and I'm feeling too impatient to do the whole thing with pencils is do an underpainting with something else. And because you do watercolor, you could do an underpainting with watercolor, which also would get rid of all the white, and then do all your detail and your gradients and your shading with pencils.
Okay, I'm on my own now. I don't have Sarah with me, and I'm trying this for myself. I was being extra and got these Derwent Chromaflows. Let's see how it goes. Picked up these Caran d'Ache blending pencils. I don't know why there are two. I guess we'll find out. And then this blending pen, which I've now learned from Sarah is just filled with alcohol, so really not necessary, but oh well. I'm gonna give Stonehenge hot press a go and hope it's better than the Academy hot press I was using. So I do plan to do an underpainting because that's gonna hopefully bring me through to my joy quicker because I am an impatient art soul. So yeah, starting with the sketch here just to kind of map out my shapes and just trying to fight off the nerves because I have no idea truly how I'm going to pull this off. Because I'm working on hot press, I know that I have to be careful with my washes. Hot press really isn't designed for big, juicy washes. So trying to go in with a light hand, get in, get her done, get out. Okay, I've let this completely dry, and I think this is likely very important because if there was any moisture here, I don't think the color pencil would lay down properly at all. Don't really have a plan here, friends, just going in, trying to remember what Sarah said about blending, the light circular motion and blending from one color to the other, kind of overlapping in the middle. I think I have that right. And then in terms of shadows, I'm just trying to think about where the petals intersect. You hear me talk about this all the time on the channel, is where the darker moments will be and where I'll place the shadows. Okay, I'm not going to keep you in suspense. Speeding through this, friends, you could see that things got muddy really fast. I don't know, I lost my shapes. I just feel like it got super dull. And so I've decided to try again. Okay, here's what I did. Number one, I didn't panic, and I could have done that easily because I don't know what I'm doing. I feel very kind of self-conscious with this whole process, but I decided to just take a moment, move away from this project, work on something else, and come back to it with fresh eyes later. After taking a break, here's what I realized. Number one, my sketch was too loose. I needed to more firmly establish the shapes because that would help me just laying down color later on and not having to make a lot of those decisions while I was executing a technique with a medium I'm very uncomfortable with. Number two, I was way too heavy-handed with the application too soon. And number three, that means I reached the paper's limit for the colored pencil way too quickly. Number four, I forgot the circular strokes, the most important lesson about laying down color. I kind of just, I don't know, I zoned out in a bad way. And lastly, number five, I didn't let the watercolor underpainting shine through enough. So let's do this again. But before we get into it, friends, let me know, is this been fun? Is it exciting for you to see me be uncomfortable and try something I'm completely unfamiliar with? If it is, go ahead, let me know in comments by saying yes. And of course, I'd love a boop for the video. That's a like. It really helps out the channel. Fast forward, I redid the sketch and was much more careful this time to really establish the structure of my flower and the more final shapes of each petal. And this is where we're at. I didn't think you needed to see me add all the washes again. You know what I'm doing. The few things I'm thinking about this time as I'm working through this second attempt. Number one, just overall using a much lighter touch. And in tandem with that thought, also just a more gradual, slow buildup of color intensity and pressure at the same time. I also realized that I haven't been sharpening my pencils enough, and I definitely have to invest in a new sharpener specifically for colored pencils because my favorite Faber-Castell one likes to kind of break the points super easily. Something else I'm thinking about that I didn't mention earlier is mark making and using the pencils not just to do super, super beautiful gradual blends, but to also just make some beautiful linear marks and dashes and dots. I've also realized it's super important to consider the washes of watercolor and the underpainting to be my lightest value and maintain that light value as needed. Gotta say, I'm proud of myself. I'm definitely doing the gradual buildup thing like I said I would. I think what's been hardest for me is to realize that not only am I building up my color intensity gradually, but that means my pressure, how hard I'm pressing on the page. That also needs to be gradual. How are we feeling about this, friends? Do you feel like I've made some semblance of a success? Or are you like, oh, Kristy, stick with watercolors. Don't worry, you won't hurt my feelings. Let me know in comments. And if you actually like this technique where I'm mixing watercolor and colored pencil, I've done it before. I'm going to link it below. You might want to check that out later. Another point that was surprising to me, especially considering how I don't like the texture of watercolor pencils, is that I really started to enjoy certain areas of this painting having more texture than others, like in that blueberry on the right-hand side. All the texture everywhere is not for me, but having these moments of texture really helps to keep the eye interested, and it overall can really assist and elevate your composition. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how much this color palette card from the color cubes has helped me in this situation. Super nervous going in, still a little nervous, not gonna lie. So not having to worry about the color palette whatsoever was super awesome. And the other thing that I have to say, I was kind of worried about the whole like, I have to find the right pencils to match the card. And honestly, it was no big deal. I just grabbed the pencils that look similar to the card and it still ended up working out. Don't forget, friends, if you want to pick up one or both of the color cubes or her entire system, head to the link in description and all the information is there for you. All right, yeah, I know I was stressed here, but I gotta say, I'm really pleased with how this turned out. I feel like this technique and approach satisfies a different part of my heart and soul for making, a different part of my brain. And I'm definitely going to call on this technique again at some point in the future. Not gonna lie though, feel like I need a little bit of a watercolor reprieve, so I'm heading to create a repeat pattern, super simple. This one's the one you should watch next. I'll see you over there.